to the compound from the south cliff. Secure Chico and Paz, then report back from the rendezvous point.
Ground Zeroes is not the Metal Gear you know. This is a game that's far more open and flexible. It's also surprisingly restrained for a Kojima project. The expected absurdity is included, but in a way that enhances rather than dominates. For the first time in a long time, Metal Gear doesn't seem infatuated with itself, resulting in a more inviting and enjoyable game. In a lot of ways, the switch to Kiefer Sutherland embodies Kojima's push for change. Since 1998, David Hayter has been the sole voice of Snake, and while he certainly brought the character to life, Sutherland also fits the role well. He's stern, dejected, committed, and distant. Ground Zeroes doesn't rely on extended monologues to characterize, giving Sutherland room to breathe and preventing him from feeling forced. After an hour or so, it's just Snake, instead of Ground Zeroes, starring Kiefer Sutherland.
10 days ago, we got reports that Paz was still alive.
She survived.
She was rescued by a Belizean fisherman who found her drifting in the Caribbean.
Even with a strong lead performance, poor writing can take you out of the moment. The series has always featured ridiculous dialogue, but since there's usually so much more of it, the few particularly rotten lines here are especially noticeable. Sometimes, it can actually ruin the scene.
They played us like a damn fiddle!
Thankfully and unexpectedly, the story doesn't get in the way of the game. Outside of the intro and conclusion, cutscenes are minimal. Part of the reason is that the main mission can be completed in less than 2 hours, but it's also due to a change in structure. The meandering codec calls of the past are gone. Instead, radio conversations happen as you explore and uncover new information.
Boss, this is a sneaking mission.
While we certainly miss things, like Colonel Campbell saying he needs scissors, this change gives Ground Zeroes a more consistent tone.
I need scissors. 61.
The different storytelling approach offers far more reason to explore. Hidden cassette tapes are scattered throughout Camp Omega, the lone setting for Ground Zeroes. The background information and context they provide helps decode how everything fits together. Those coming solely for the story, however, may be disappointed, even after collecting every last bit of intel. Ground Zeroes quickly sets the stage for something much bigger, and that's about it. There's a surprising twist, but we still found ourselves wanting. We appreciate Kojima holding the cards close to his chest, but for $30, we expected a little more.
Trojan horse is in!
The game also assumes players are caught up with Metal Gear lore, which is a tall order. Since the story directly follows the events of Peace Walker, it's what Ground Zeroes draws from the most. If names like Paz and Chico don't ring a bell, it'll dampen the impact of the most potent moments. There's an 11-page summary that does an admirable job of trying to catch everyone up, but expect to be confused if that's all you have to go on. Even those that don't have a clue will still have a great time with Ground Zero, since it plays better than any Metal Gear before it. One of the most obvious changes is Snake's enhanced mobility. Additions like sprinting, diving into prone, and firing from behind cover give you plenty of options when you do get spotted. In past games, a loud, lethal approach felt out of place, but here, it's viable and satisfying in its own right. There's nothing quite like firing a rocket into a group of enemies for the sake of it, then dashing toward a jeep and speeding away as the entire base hunts you down. This kind of open mayhem can happen in plenty of other games, but here it's a bonus on top of exceptional, stealth-focused infiltration, which is more challenging this time around thanks to smarter enemies. Instead of having very limited and obvious cones of vision, enemies can now spot you from considerable distances if you're out in the open. The heightened sensitivity makes enemies less exploitable, and therefore, more threatening. When you're detected, instead of the game immediately triggering an alert state, time slows down to give Snake a chance to react. If you take down the enemy that found you, they won't alarm anyone else. Initially, this feels cheap, as if it's completely removing the risk of being found, but it doesn't take long to appreciate, since the flow of the game actually improves. Instead of constantly having to run and hide just because a stray enemy happened to see you, there's a chance to correct small errors. Now, players won't spend as much time waiting behind cover for a search team to disperse. It certainly makes things a bit easier, but reckless play still carries plenty of consequence. Enemies that spot you from far away are hard to take out, even in slow motion, encouraging players to avoid areas easily seen from a watchtower. Another consideration is that if enemies are dead, they can't talk. Interrogations are one of the best additions to Metal Gear yet. Not only do they reveal important intel, like the location of a hostage, interrogated enemies will also cough up item locations. It's tough staying on course after hearing about a sniper rifle nearby, or getting clued into the whereabouts of a hard-to-find collectible. Interrogations make it seem like there's always something new to discover. While hunting for secrets is great, the missions themselves are even more memorable. The main mission involves rescuing 2 hostages, which seems straightforward, but there are some surprising moments. Upon entering a small camp full of POWs, for example, do you attempt to evacuate them or abandon them to avoid the risk? These unexpected situations create subtle choices that were previously absent in the series.
Come in!
Unlockable side missions do an exceptional job of forcing you to adapt your playstyle. One particularly strong mission involves finding and assassinating 2 officers. Taking a slow, stealthy approach is ineffective since both targets are well guarded. Getting loud is even worse. If one target becomes aware of you killing the other, they flee and escape from the base. It's a situation that allows for creative solutions, which can be said about all of the side missions, with one exception. An extended turret sequence that is Snake shooting a machine gun with infinite ammo at relentless waves of enemies is uncharacteristically rote. There is an amusing Easter egg at the end, but it still feels like a wasted opportunity. What isn't a waste is Metal Gear's new Fox engine. We played Ground Zeroes on a PS4 at 1080p and 60 frames per second. Previous Metal Gear games had trouble keeping things smooth, but we didn't see any noticeable drops during our time with Ground Zeroes. We're most impressed with the lighting, which is especially excellent at night. The numerous lights scattered throughout the base cast convincing shadows, which adds a lot to the atmosphere. There are occasionally awkward facial animations, but it's a minor complaint that barely detracts from an excellent-looking game.
Make him regret it, boss.
For months, we've worried that Ground Zeroes only exists to gouge the faithful. It turns out that just isn't the case. Unless you're determined to only go through the main mission once, there are plenty of things worth seeing. The greatest achievement in Ground Zeroes is how bold it feels. There's so much that's new, and none of it obfuscates what originally made Metal Gear Solid special. There's still thrilling stealth and an attention to detail that's rarely seen, but all of it is smarter and streamlined. Ground Zeroes may only be a taste of what's to come, but it looks like Metal Gear is heading in the right direction.